Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Mayor and councillors. Tonight we'll be live streaming this meeting on Facebook. Please ensure that your mobile phones are muted during the session. Thank you. And we are now live.
Welcome all to the 10th of February 2025 Council meeting, the first for 2025. I open the meeting at 7 p.m. Our meeting is being held on the traditional land of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, and on behalf of Banyule City Council, I acknowledge them as the traditional custodians. I would also like to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung elders, past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders joining us today. Our community is made up of diverse cultures, beliefs, abilities, bodies, sexualities, ages and genders. We are committed to access, equity, participation and rights for everyone, principles which empower, foster harmony and increase the well-being of an inclusive community. I will now pass on to the Chief Executive Officer, Ms Alison Beckwith, who will read out all the formalities.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome all. As the Mayor indicated, this is an ordinary meeting of Council and my name is Alison Beckwith and I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at Banyule. Tonight's meeting is being held in person in accordance with the provisions of Council's governance rules and the Local Government Act 2020. The meeting, as indicated, is being also live streamed via Council's website and Facebook page. The live stream is not interactive, so for those at home, any comments or private messages directed to us while the meeting is being conducted will not be presented to the Council group or have bearing on the conduct of tonight's meeting. Council also has a request to speak methods and continue to allow participation of residents without having to attend meetings in person if they're unable to make a meeting. I'll just take you through the rules of public participation. Public question time will occur at the conclusion of the meeting. If a member of the public who submitted a question is present, they are welcome to read their question as submitted or have their question read out on their behalf by a staff member. If not present, the question will not be read out. However, all public questions and responses will be included in the meeting minutes following the meeting. No statement may be derogatory, defamatory or directed to an individual councillor, member of staff, ratepayer or member of the public. For those of you that have submitted a request to speak tonight, there is a 2-minute time limit. The timer will be used and a warning will sound at the 1.5 minute period, just giving you an indication to start summing up and that you have 30 seconds left. If indeed a statement is being read out by a staff member on a resident's behalf, the same rules apply. We ask that members of the gallery please check their phone and ensure that it is either off or on silent mode to avoid any disruption. I'd like to also remind everyone in the gallery that Council has a zero tolerance for any form of bullying, harassment or violence. Everyone present in the gallery, including community, members of Council staff and councillors, are expected to respect the individual views of all others, irrespective of their own views, and respectfully allow people to participate in a Council meeting in a safe manner. I also ask any members in our gallery, if you are leaving the meeting before the meeting is finished, I ask you kindly not to hold conversations just in the foyer. They do reverberate up into this and affect those listening at home. So if we could hold those conversations once you exit the building, that would be greatly appreciated. And I thank you in advance for that. I'll now introduce you to the team who's here tonight, and I'll begin with the councillors. So starting to my left, I have Councillor Matt Wood, Councillor Alicia Curry, Councillor Mary O'Kane and Councillor Alison Champion. The councillor colleagues to my right, Mayor, Councillor Elizabeth Neely, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Peter Castaldo, Councillor Rick Barotti, Councillor Alida McKern and Councillor Mark D. Pasquale. We're also joined here tonight with members of the executive team. So to my left, I have Natasha Swan, Director of City Development, and Joseph Tobacco, Director of Community Wellbeing. And to the right, Director of Asset City Services, Darren Bennett, and Mark Filio, Corporate Services. We also are supported here tonight by members of the governance team and IT team. And thank you for coming in, and happy February to you.
Thank you, Alison. I just wanted to mention the technical issues at the 9th of the December meeting. At that meeting, there were 2 separate technical difficulties, which has not happened at this council in 4 years. This included the meeting not being live streamed and the audio not recorded for a time, particularly as we were advised through social media and emails that the meeting would be available. So to address these technical issues, we've developed a protocol to immediately rectify the difficulty and reduce any inconvenience. We've also introduced a backup in case of live streaming recording issues, YouTube streaming as well as Facebook Live. So once again, we apologise for the inconvenience caused to those at our last meeting online or those who wanted that for reference. Okay, we'll get straight into it. There are no apologies or any requests for leave of absence this evening. Confirmation of the minutes from the ordinary meeting of council held on the 9th of December. Can I please have a councillor to move? Moved, Councillor Curry. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor McKern. I now put the motion. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Disclosure of interest is required at any other meeting of council. Councillors must declare a conflict of interest at the start of the meeting and leaving the meeting when the item is presented to council. Councillors will be required to leave the meeting and return when the item has been resolved. At any point throughout the meeting, if any other councillor recognises that they have a general or material interest, they can flag that at that point and follow the same procedure. Are there any disclosures of interest? Yes. Councillor Curry's indicated they have a conflict. Can you please advise us of the item that you have a conflict?
Item 6.1, which is the amendment C1 Planning Panel Report for Heidelberg Structure Plan. And I'll declare the conflict meeting. So in my private capacity as a resident, prior to becoming a councillor, provided a submission to the planning panel in relation to the C172. I'm of the view that if I was to participate in the decision of this item now as an impartial, fair-minded person may consider that my private view could impact, and as such, declaring general.
Thank you, Councillor Curry, for declaring the nature of your interest. Officers present, I now ask whether you have a conflict of interest in any items passed for council tonight. No. We are now going to move on, thank you, to urgent business. There are no items. Petitions, there is one petition. Proposed Telstra mobile phone tower at 218 Waterdale Road, Ivanhoe. There are 7 speakers on this item, which is more than the usual amount. We'll begin with David Jancic. I apologise if I pronounce that. Jancic, you will address for the recommendation. David, please, you're already there. You have 2 minutes.
There are several key issues of the proposal as presented to the President. Firstly, this is being imposed. Telstra has made clear from the outset that development approval is not required. Therefore, any proper due diligence of the proposal by local. Secondly, Telstra has misled the community through this process. They claim they have considered alternative locations for this site, such as the waste recovery centre down the road, for example, we know from your... They sought approval 5 years ago for a very 30-metre monopole tower, which of course would reject. Relying on this historical projection and reject much. Thirdly, the commercial zoning being relied upon does not consider the actual location of very small shops. Yes, commercial by houses of 15 metres. Fourth, character and amenity. Put simply, it does not fit the character of Ivanhoe. And fifth, simple solution would be for the mobile panels to be located 150 metres or so down the road of the waste. That building is already at height, not as it's owned by already. This alternative scenario, Telstra can install their towers. Council gains a new revenue stream from the lease part of the roof. Councillors, we need your help. We ask that you please, 1, reconsider such facility on council assets, such as the waste recovery. Second, support the community by opposing the current Telstra proposal. Finally, help fix this for the community by offering Telstra a common sense. That is, placing a new mobile nearby.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I'll just make a quick reminder if everyone could speak to time, as there are more than usual speakers on this item. Are there any questions? Brian Grace from Good Governance Manual will address the council in person. He's speaking against the recommendation. Thank you, Brian.
Actually, just to change, I answered that wrongly. I'm actually for the petition, but I'm against the tower.
Okay. Okay.
All right. My name is Brian Grace. I'm a resident of Greensborough and have been for over 43 years. I'm also president of Good Governance Manual, and I think that if we look at what Telstra is trying to do, it's trying to railroad the community of Ivanhoe. What it's not doing is there's no public forum, and it's meant to have a public forum. It's meant to talk to the community and ask them what it is they want and don't want on this tower, and that's not been done. We, as a community, are asking, although it's a small group of people in Ivanhoe, it's really a group of people who have first been forced into taking action that live in Ivanhoe. The next will be McLeod. The next of that will be Greensborough, because Telstra have said to their shareholders and to their clients that they want to dominate the telecommunications field in Melbourne and Sydney. And they believe by doing that, if they have overreaching powers of their telecommunications, then they'll be able to beat Vodafone and Optus. Now, Vodafone and Optus have towers within Ivanhoe, but no one really has protested those because they're much smaller and they have the same coverage. Telstra has the coverage. This is an overlapping. This is and now again, it's sort of overdoing something that doesn't need to be done. So just lastly, the people of Ivanhoe are looking to you, the councillors, for a voice.
Thank you, Brian.
They want you to be their voice.
Thank you. Okay. Mary John will address the council in person, speaking against the recommendation. Thank you, Mary. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Yeah, hi. I apologise in advance because there's probably some crossover in what has been said. My name is Mary John. I live at 11 Beatty Street, Ivanhoe, and I am strongly against the proposed Telstra Tower at 218 Water Road, Ivanhoe, due to its significant and detrimental visual effects on the amenity of the surrounding residents and neighbourhood, with the tower rising to 3.97 metres above ground. I would like to draw attention to an email received from Natasha Swan Director of City Development on the 17th of the 12th, 24, and highlight one of the points in this, quote, "The Balfour Community Hub is a new facility and rooftop communication would detract from the visual amenity of the building. The hub is across the road from Ford Park, bounded by Banksia and Perkins Street, and would have minimal impact due to its position and height. The height would limit the need for a higher tower and therefore only the aerials on top of the building. Amenity for those surrounding the proposed 218 Waterloo Road site is not mentioned in this email, which is very concerning and shows, in my opinion, total disregard for the ratepayers opposed and affected. I forwarded this email to Elizabeth Neely this afternoon, like tabled. So, as per the RFNCA website, there is an existing communications tower at the Banksia Banyule Park and Garden Service Centre facility at Banksia Street. So there is a precedence here for Banyule Council to allow the use of their sites. The Banyule Recycling Centre, therefore, could be another alternative site as well as a hub. It is, however, up to authorities involved to find appropriate sites for the communications and not leave it to residents who have to advocate for something a lot more appropriate and not impact them. We have heard, not sure from where, but that access can be an issue, but there is currently towers and many aerials on the rooftops of businesses, shops, restaurants, other councils, hospitals, etc. all over Melbourne. So this does not appear a relevant issue. Lastly, has the council been approached and declined the use of their buildings for community facilities? As Natasha's email would indicate, I'm not sure if that has been asked. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Are there any questions? John Wilson will address council in person. Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Natasha. Yes, I'm in Robin Street, which is 2 streets down from the proposed tower, and I'm going over some of the stuff that's been also said already. But look, just in terms of when we found out about this tower was just through sheer luck that one of the residents, Clara, who'd wandered past, saw the poster up on the side of the Australia Post shop there, agency shop. It was in a very poor location, and it actually had the location of Banyule, not Belfield on there, which was inaccurate because it's actually in Ivanhoe. It's not north of Banksia Street. So it was poor form by Telstra to not even get their facts right in the first instance. So look, obviously, as the tower is located in a residential area, it's more than a commercial area because it's right on the end of that little group of shops and overlooking people in Beatty Street in particular, and the people who live in the residences directly behind the shopping centre there, which was built about 10 years ago. We've been here for 26 years in Robin Street, which is 2 streets down. And look, my immediate concern was in terms of why Surrey Council knocked back places like the Waste Recovery Centre, but it's been brought up that maybe they weren't approached by Telstra in the last application for this. So I think that'd be an ideal spot for it, and hopefully we can work down that path, and hopefully your planning department or whoever looked after that within council, the councillors are now aware of it, and you can work together with the residents because you're the level of government that really should be responsible for looking after the residents, hopefully, in this. So it's excessive in height. It's an eyesore. It'll lead to possibly lower house prices in the immediate vicinity, and that's of concern to all of us. And as I said, the community engagement's been at best poor, and if really it's almost been misleading. So hopefully with 324 local residents' signatures, that says something that Clara and Tom collected in there on there coming up to speak shortly. So hopefully you'll listen to the representation tonight and we'll get some action in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Grotti.
Yeah, Mayor, if it be okay with you, I have a question for the Speaker. Yeah, thank you, Speaker. Very appreciative of your comments.
Thanks.
Just picking up on the theme of local government being the representative.
Yeah.
My understanding is telecommunication is regulated by the federal government.
Yeah, it is.
I'm just wondering what discussions you have and your fellow residents with the federal member.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll leave that to Tom. I think he's done a lot of communication with the federal member, the local member, and also beyond that in terms of taking it further with the relevant ministry. communication to federal parliament. So if that's okay, Rick, I'll get Tom to answer that one if that's okay.
Thank you. A written,
Would you like me to answer that question
uh,
or not? Sorry, I wasn't
soon. We'll continue through. A written statement will now be read out by Darren Bennett on behalf of Melissa Murphy-Webster, who is for the recommendation.
Sorry, I'm speaking because I've been following the concerns of a few residents in this ward regarding the installation of another 5G tower so close to existing ones. I understand that the period to put in objections has lapsed. However, with regard to environmental and health concerns, I believe discussions about installation of new towers, especially those so close to residents, must be prioritised and should continue. My understanding is that there has been, following requests, no evidence provided to residents to allay fears that there is no detrimental outcomes from this installation. I myself am very concerned about the lack of reasonable data to provide long-term safety for people, animals, plants exposed. I'm not sure if Council has interacted with the Australian Local Government Association in regard to they've made a 2019 submission to the House of Representatives about the deployment, adoption and application of 5G in Australia. Might be worth following. There is a 30-minute video which can be played at 2 times speed and does well to collate a lot of information. It was put together for St Luke's School in New South Wales, but it is still relevant. I'm interested in knowing what is being discussed between the councillors about this future installation. And I'm also keenly following Whittlesea too. Now they have councillors again.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mark Lazzarotti, who will address Council in person. Thank you, Mark. You have you can turn the microphone on. You have 2 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, firstly, I'd like to thank Banyule Council for us to discuss. A true democracy happens when business, community and all levels of government, by collaborating, they can meet everyone's needs and create a fair solution. This teamwork builds trust and ensures policies benefit all citizens, leading to a thriving and healthy society like here in Banyule. It's clear, though, that only Telstra has been involved in the proposed mobile EMF radiation tower at the Ivanhoe North Post Office, and they seem very reluctant to work with us, community. There are alternative locations, as already mentioned, but it goes beyond what's been mentioned up until now, because the parcel of land, of council land, actually extends from Waterdale Road all the way down Banksia Street to Darebin Creek. So it's actually 200,000 square metres of land. This tower can be placed, and it's not going to change any of the signal strength for everybody, and it'll still achieve the non-essential increase in local mobile Telstra's trying to get. But if you put the tower along that stretch, there's a 100-metre buffer either side for any residents along that line, and about 80% less residents are going to be affected. So there is a choice there, alternative. More and more of these towers are going to be erected, and it will affect all residents and councillors in Banyule and beyond. And it may be time now for council to consider having a more direct and engaging policy about where these towers can be erected, what is appropriate and what not appropriate, and whether EMF exposure should be included in council health and wellbeing. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mark. Our final speaker is Thomas Kotsonis. He will address council and maybe respond later to the question. Thank you.
Apologies for the misstep there. Good evening. I thank the council for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. In addition, a special thanks to Councillor McKern and Councillor Neely for their guidance and advocacy, and for the council to have written to Telstra voicing our concerns is appreciated. This is an impassioned plea for council to support our position and work closely with Telstra to suggest more appropriate alternate sites to the one currently proposed. This will also have the added benefit of generating an ongoing income stream for council. Not a bad deal, right? It is unconscionable that Telstra deems this as an appropriate site, being literally metres away from the nearest residential homes and in the heart of the community-sensitive area. A quote from section 6.1.3 from the Mobile Base Station Deployment Code. The size and scope of consultation plan should be weighed against the likely impact the proposal will have on directly affected parties, relevant stakeholders and community-sensitive education. A reminder that the consultation report indicated 93% of 98 submissions are against the current location and would like Telstra to work with Banyule Council to consider other alternate sites. This is non-vital infrastructure and overdevelopment, as mentioned earlier by Brian as well, in a residential and community-sensitive area. From the hundreds of residents we've spoken with during our petition, the consensus is we have adequate coverage in the area. Telstra's hasty decision stands to significantly alter and ruin the amenity of our neighbourhood, permanently impacting the lives of hundreds of residents for decades to come. This will set a precedent to implement future 5G towers in close proximity to residential areas, impacting other wards across Banyule. It is critical that processes are tightened up, another site being considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. If you'd now like to answer Councillor Garotti's question, would you like to repeat it, Councillor?
Yeah, just the question is the engagement yourself and other residents have had with the local federal member on this matter, given that the federal government's responsible for regulating telecommunication.
Yes, I have to give a big shout out to Kate Waits. She has been advocating for the community. Everybody here is aware of that. We've had a community forum with her and she's been representing our interests. She's been very instrumental in getting our case across to the ACMA, because I have to be careful what I say here, but there are some question marks over some of the compliances. So there is currently an assessment being conducted, and that's gone to the parliamentary ministerial level, right? And that's under assessment at the moment. She's also been speaking with Minister Michelle Rowland, and I know there's been some interaction with Anthony Carbines, been some discussion there as well, and she's been liaising with council. So there are a number of things that she's been advocating on. Hope that answers your question.
If you'd like to stay there, Councillor Curry has a question.
Thank you. Thanks for speaking and to all of the speakers. The question is, did Kate Wade off Telstra not speak?
Twice. Excuse me, twice.
Did Telstra?
Okay, so there's been a development there. So to answer your question from the initial, because this proposal has gone through two issues. The first issue, we had asked Kate Waits to make representation. She did. She made representation to ServiceStream. She made representation to Telstra. They were not forthcoming in information. It's not to say they didn't respond. They did, but they weren't forthcoming with the information. That's the first part of the question. That happened again during the reissue. Again, representation was made to Telstra. They were not forthcoming in response. As a consequence of the meeting that we had with the community here, Kate followed up with Telstra to have a community forum. We're not jumping ahead at the moment. We want to wait until ACMA completes its compliance assessment and until we engage. That's the consensus from the community. Hope that helps.
Thank you. Yes, so Telstra was. What date do you expect?
Sorry, what do you mean Telstra wasn't invited?
To the consultation that
with Kate? No, that was something that Kate organised with us.
Just,
yes.
And you're awaiting to follow up with Telstra for a report. When do you expect
No, the report has been, when you say report, are you referring to the consultation report?
I'm sorry, I thought you just mentioned that you, or that you had investigation.
No, that's the ACMA, not
ACMA. So,
Yeah.
do you explain what you're waiting on?
Yes, so the ACMA is currently conducting a compliance assessment. Okay, and we understand that the result of that will be available just before mid-February. That's what we're waiting.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Thomas.
Through you, Mayor, I
Yes, thank you. Councillor.
you. First to Tom Yes. Tom, could you address the podium, please? Thank you. And thank you for the work you've done around this, supporting your community. I'm interested to know, you mentioned that there was a forum with Kate Waits. What is your definition of a forum as such, and who was invited to the forum? There is a difference between a forum and a meeting, as I appreciate. Forum is something that's generally much larger than a meeting. Who was invited to this forum? What do you mean by a forum?
Okay, so in the definition, because I don't want to play with semantics here, but basically Kate Waits asked myself as a representative to invite some representatives from the community, and I did. They're representatives that have been fighting the cause with us and that have been very active.
So how many were there?
So there were, I think, just less than 12 of us, just under.
So do you think a public forum is warranted
With Telstra or with who?
with council?
With the council.
Yes, with respect to further advocacy to Telstra.
I don't know if I'm in a position to speak on
Yeah,
everyone's
Councillor, I
behalf.
think we have to be straight on to the petition that's ahead of us.
So I don't want to make a call on that on
Yeah,
behalf of
thank you.
everybody.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
I do have one more here. That is to another one of the speakers, Brian Grace. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Grace, for your, Brian, for your comments.
That's all right.
Um,
I was
given-
called that at school.
I'm sure it's been done before. Given your long-term position as President of Good Governance Renewal, I'm just wondering if there are examples that you might be aware of where Council has located telco towers on Council-owned land that you can share with.
Yes, there's been two precedent cases. One is the Windsor Park or Windsor Reserve. There was that tower was originally planned to go somewhere else, but it was with negotiation with the Banyule City Council, it was moved to Windsor Park. The other one was in Montmorency, and there was a communications tower on top of a factory, and either the Telstra wanted it moved or someone wanted it moved, and council then negotiated the movement of that tower. So there is a precedent for Banyule Council to be involved in the moving or non-building of towers.
Thank you. Brian?
Councillors, there's an officer report before you. Is there a councillor to move the motion? Councillor McKern.
That council able to refer the consideration response additional motion that receive a report considers location, site, brackets, road, C, immediate emergency. Question. Pause. For primary. Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder to this additional motion? Councillor Grotti has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and it may be directed toward Councillor, if that's okay. Question, but in terms of just 3C, Councillor McKern, around advocacy to Telstra, I'm just wondering if that is the appropriate advocacy point, given that the approval authority, as I understand it, rests with the federal government. And I'm just wondering if advocacy ought to be occurring at that level. So possibly a question for you, or possibly a question for the director, or both. Thank you, Mayor.
Through you, Mayor. Possibly the director will have her opinion. There are many areas of work, services, facilities that council is not responsible for. That does fall within the jurisdiction of other government levels, state and federal. And just to give you one example, transport of our major roads, planning. But that does not stop this council from advocating, because our job as a is to represent our community. If our community has concerns, we advocate. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Grotti.
No, I'm just understand the concept of advocacy, Councillor. I've been on the council for 12 years. It's about who we're advocating to, because in your recommended C, it's to a private corporation, and typically as a council, and the examples that you've just provided involve advocacy to other levels of government. So I'm seeking whether this council ought to be advocating to the appropriate level of government on this matter.
Well, I would suggest we do both, but I'm happy to defer such a question to the greater wisdom of the director.
Through you, Mayor, Telstra doesn't approve its own application to the best of my knowledge. There's a process that it does go through. More normally, as Councillor Grotti raised, we would advocate the level of government that oversees that process, as they're in the position to actually influence it.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Well, Mayor, I'm foreshadowing some potential amendments for consideration by the mover. Is that okay? If agreeable to the mover, and I'm just exploring whether the public forum should incorporate an invitation to the local federal member and ensuring that the availability of our honourable member, and that point 3C, that the advocacy occur to the appropriate federal government department or regulator. Because as our directors pointed out, it's the regulator that will sign off, and we really need them to put a pause on things rather than the private company. So for your consideration, Councillor.
Through you, Mayor, can I respond? With respect to point 3A, I accept your amendment. I think that it's a wise choice to be involving the federal member that, as you say, is responsible for communications in terms of her position at federal level. With respect to point C, I would also accept that we advocate to our federal member. However, on the proviso that we also CC in Telstra, because I think Telstra, for the sake of transparency and accountability, needs to know what we're advocating on, how we're doing it.
I'm just giving councillors the opportunity to have a read of this. Do you have a question, Councillor Kane?
Through you, Mayor. My question's around what it would take for council officers to research and analyse what alternative sites could be to 18 Waterdale Road. I have enormous sympathy with the plight of having something imposed on you like this. I do, but we're also looking at the practicalities of where alternative sites could be. We've had some discussion about the ones that have been proposed, and I think I could ask Director of Assets to kind of explain some of the complications of those assets. But also, what would it take to research and find alternatives, alternative sites?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, I can probably answer both, but City Assets is welcome to add anything he thinks of value. It is a complex problem for us because it depends in part on what is the infrastructure. So as would be evident in the report tabled tonight in response to the petition and previous correspondence, we have been asked for a range of different facilities over a long period of time across the city. So the suitability of a site and what it can accommodate is a very highly technical assessment. We wouldn't have the in-house expertise to work out what sort of facility works where and how it fits the coverage, for example. More normally, council's role is to receive requests for infrastructure proposals prepared by the telecommunications provider who understands what is required. The complexities of the Waste Recovery Centre and also our Parks and Gardens depot come and speak to the operational nature. Once council's entered into a lease, it needs to provide reasonable access to the telecommunications supplier for maintenance and ongoing management of the telecommunication facilities, and in both of those cases that would cause the shutdown of those centres in order to facilitate that access. So an ongoing challenge that would need to be overcome if we're something that council wanted.
Councillor Curry.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm just checking. We've got a motion on the table. We want to ask our item would be most.
I think, yeah, to set, so if a councillor is willing to second this, we can debate, and then if it won or lost, we can then move the original motion. So we might start with that. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Garotti. Councillor McKern.
First and foremost, thank our speakers this evening for your statements tonight and your persistence in standing up for what is important as a community. I want you to know that I hear you and that I take your concerns very seriously, and that there has been indeed considerable debate amongst the councillor group. Having listened to our speakers and engaging in many discussions about this with affected residents, and it is unfortunate that this issue arose during the council election caretaker period, which in itself has caused problems. I'm not sure, though, that the issue is indeed the installation of a mobile tower. Everyone I've spoken to has presented as very reasonable people who would pass the pub test on most things. The community's need for modern communication services is understood, and I think it's understood by everyone. The issue here, by what I'm hearing, is the proposed siting of a 7.7 metre mobile tower in a sensitive use zone, which is sensitive by virtue of its close proximity to residential owners and occupiers who live only 15 metres from the site, and the lack of what is considered proper consultation on the part of Telstra. Indeed, as it's been said, there is currently an investigation being undertaken by the Communications and Media Authority as to the potential breach. So, Residents are telling the council that they don't feel. Yet the federal government website for telecommunications states clearly that telecommunication carriers are expected to engage with communities in a meaningful and sensitive way about proposed deployments. I'm not sure that any of us heard that that's happened. Telecommunications carriers are known to have changed site locations or other elements of proposed installation activity based on community and council feedback. Indeed, I'm informed, as Mr Grace has told us, that council has worked with the telcos in the past to change proposed tower locations. This should not be lost on the council group. So not just for this tower, but for ongoing towers in other parts of Banyule, we need to be mindful of how we engage the community, with the telcos and with our federal member. For the sake of transparency, accountability, community trust and the remit of council to represent and advocate concerns, I appeal to you, my friends, to support this.
Thank you, Councillor. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It's encouraging to hear from our speakers that the advocacy and engagement has been there from the local federal member. So that's really pleasing to hear and positive. Typically, when a council receives a petition, and as an example, in our most recent council meeting in December, we had a petition from the Grimshaw ward, and we follow a standard process, which is outlined in the officer recommendation. And to be honest, I think that serves us well as a council. And I'm going to be very interested to hear what my colleagues feel and say about that. But I did think that if we were going to be putting forward an alternative recommendation, that we at least did pick up the critical importance of the advocacy with the federal member and the advocacy for the appropriate federal government representatives and regulators. So that's reflected, but I'm looking forward to hearing what my colleagues think from a process perspective, weigh up whether I support it or not. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Curry.
Thanks, Mayor. A couple of questions. The health standards of the... Whose role is...
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mayor. I can probably answer it the most in part. It's not an area that I'm particularly familiar with because we don't have that role, but my understanding is that UPANZA, the national authority, coincidentally located in our municipality, that sets the relevant standards and guidelines for managing anything that has a radiation or a radiating element to it. And they apply standards that infrastructure must comply with at a technical level to mitigate health impacts on the community.
Are you aware that an assessment was done at this?
We haven't received any formal advice of that nature in relation to this proposal, and I wouldn't have anticipated that we would, given that we don't have a role in the approving and assessing component of the
what is preventing or stop them or should they wish?
Through you, Mayor, notwithstanding the comments from the community around a process matter that is being undertaken that I'm not privy to, there's no singular action other than the activity proposed that I can think of that council could undertake if it has in fact received.
Thank you. I'm just going to make some comments. Item. It is a bit of a challenging one, so I'd like to acknowledge because there definitely was a lack of process. I like to see community consultation with the right people in the right room together for discussion to see if we can find some resolution, complaints or considerations. I consider this a council role for advocacy. It has been brought up through the think tank as one of the principles that they'd like to see us advocate even in the private realm. So I consider it should be considering going forward. We have our advocacy coming up later in the agenda, so we'll address that then, and we will certainly consider further advocacy on this issue as a whole. I'm open to considering Telstra infrastructure on council land. I don't think that's an issue. What I think we're struggling with here is the pathway to find you a resolution that will give you what you want, whilst taking care not to waste council resources on a pathway that doesn't give us an avenue to restrict the actions that Telstra will take. And so I'm really struggling with, we could end up in a situation where Telstra build their infrastructure and we're locked into a pathway that creates a consultation around a process that gives you no result for already. So just another 30 seconds on that. So I am looking forward to hearing the other councillors' views on this. I'm certainly, I just am struggling with this item. I understand there's a timing issue. I suspect if it had come to council before they'd gone into caretaker, there would have been a much clearer pathway. I'm just thinking about how we give you what is necessary to give you an out.
Thank you, councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Wood.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor McKern, for the work you've done here, and to all the speakers. The way you articulated points was excellent. A question first for Director Swan. If we were to go down this path of locating alternative sites, A, is that our function? And B, what might that process?
Through you, Mayor, with the recommendations as it's written for the 3rd of March meeting, the location alternative site is something that would be at best quite preliminary. So as alluded to earlier, it's challenging for us to identify alternative sites when it's not entirely sure what infrastructure is would accommodate at that site. So as to whether it resolves the issue of the infrastructure they're seeking at Waterdale Road is also something that we wouldn't necessarily be aware of. So I guess some of the risks for us would be identifying locations for other installations, and yet one still proceeds in addition to that. But certainly our report would give some considerations and analysis, the risk, the costs, and the time and investment required in order to do that properly.
Thank you, Director. Look, I concur with Councillor Curry's comments that I really empathise with this. 15 metres from someone's home. Certainly not something that I'd appreciate. If we're talking about, we're going to be talking about advocacy in a couple of items' time. Banyule has a great history and reputation in advocacy. If we're talking about advocating on this topic, you have my full support. In terms of tying up council resources for this single tower, I do have an issue with. We're under constant pressure to stay in our lane, stick to council business, and I struggle to see the use of council resource, as hard as that is, staying here and for you to hear. As it stands there, I don't think I can support the motion.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor O'Kane.
Through you, Mayor. I kind of see this in two parts. As a resident, as I said before, I'm incredibly sympathetic with the issue that you're having something very strong, very prominent imposed on you. And from an aesthetic perspective, I think it's very confronting from a consultation point of view, I think for me this is where I support what you're doing. I think you've had an unfair consultation or lack of consultation process, which is due to you, even under the, according to Telstra's own written standard. The second point of it kind of automatically being council, council responsibility to relocate it, I think it's a very complicated issue. And I think it, like Councillor Wood was saying, it takes a lot of resources and it's things that are not quite obvious, and a lot of. So I think I would support you on mostly on the position of that you by right should have their consultation process with council support.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Di Pasquale.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, my thoughts are that it's just a little bit unusual having direction in a petition such as 3A, B and C. Generally, we would have a petition presented to us and we'd be making a decision of whether we accept that petition. And then the officers will go away and write a report on that. And in that report may come with recommendations such as 3A, B and C as a process. But having said that, I think there are some issues that and in my mind, I think I can accommodate those on the basis that we have just come out of the caretaker period and election, and that had affected the process of consultation, community activation, councillor involved. So that's the first point. Secondly, too, I've heard tonight from one of our speakers that there are also other areas of the municipality that may be in the firing line of these towers, such as McLeod and Greensborough, etc. If that is the case, I think we need to be taking a little bit more of a stand right now, not letting, we need to be a bit more cautious here. Thirdly, another speaker did mention whether these towers and these type of telecommunication issues or will be picked up in our health and wellbeing plan, which is being constructed at the moment. So I think for those reasons, I think I'm comfortable committing to this, accepting this petition with the 3A, B and C, and trying to get as much community consultation as possible, but more so looking to see whether the consultation has been inadequate. Because I think if it has been inadequate by our federal member, which I think it probably hasn't been, I'm not sure yet, but we may need to put a little bit more advocacy on the table.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just listening to what everybody is saying this evening. I am hearing, while I do agree with Councillor Mark that normally a petition is accepted and then our office go ahead and create a report. This is a slight variation on a theme. I'm hearing that 3A and 3C are essential. I'm not hearing the same for 3B. So my question is, at this point, if I were to support this variation on a theme, I'm probably in line with council. Wouldn't support it 3B sitting in there. Is it possible at this point to remove 3B? And we are still supporting our community.
We're voting on the motion as it stands. Thank you. It's been moved, seconded. We have to come to a vote.
If this motion fails, are you foreshadowing alternative that would have 3B removed?
Yes, I am, Councillor. Thank you for clarifying. Yes.
Mayor, question based on the question. Thank you, Mayor. Director Swan, given that a report is due to come back within 3 weeks, one of the concerns I'm hearing from the council group is that human resource could be quite extensive towards considering alternative sites, and that might be swaying a decision. But within 3 weeks' time, a report is coming back to council. I can't imagine that too much human resources would be possible to fit into 3 weeks' time. Just your thoughts on that.
Through you, Mayor, it's entirely a matter for council whether they wish to move a motion for a report in that time frame. I could foreshadow that it's unlikely that the report would have much depth or analysis, could be achieved within the 3rd of March. I think at best we would probably indicate more of a process, which probably questions whether we would actually meet the intent of PUP as it's currently worded.
And just if I can jump in, just to clarify, because our timelines don't really allow 3 weeks, even though the meeting's in 3 weeks, it goes out to the public before the meeting. So it is a confined time period.
Does any other councillor wish to speak?
I fully recognise the importance of this matter to a lot of you here tonight, but firstly, council isn't the authority that decides this, and secondly, we're not the authority with the expertise to really say yes or no to this. That has to go through due process, and within 3 weeks' time to do a report on a subject matter we don't have expertise on and advise on what should be handled by very technical, scientific, important processes, I see problematic, but it is our role to advocate. I do recognise that. And on the grounds that we will consider those elements, not we must do all those things. I'm happy to support this because I'd like to do it timely and what we can do. So I can support it as it's written up.
Right of reply.
I'd like to have to speak.
Sorry.
It was every councillor's spoken. Thank you, councillors. I think there's a little bit of confusion happening now. There's a lot of information and a lot of complexities to this, and it's not as straightforward as it seems. So we're asking for a report. We're asking for a meeting with the public. We're asking for Kate Thwaites to be at the meeting. We're asking for alternative locations. We can ask for all of these things, but tomorrow that tower can still be built. I would like to receive this petition. I have spoken to a number of the Ivanhoe residents regarding this, and we'd like to let our officers get the response back to us that is the correct response. So I do applaud Councillor McKern, though, for trying through every way possible to try and change this outcome, but at the end of the day, this outcome is not changed by us. So council can put towers on sites. This is not about a council site versus a public site. We have towers on sites. This was not recommended because of us. This was a recommendation from Telstra, an identified site. So we just got to be very careful with what we do as a council here. I'd like to thank all the residents that have called and emailed and kept us, in the loop with this. And I think we might just to get things moving, put this alternate motion to a vote.
With all due respect, I would like to
have your right of reply. Thank you, councillor.
Thank you very much. And thank you to my fellow councillors. You've obviously given this a lot of thought, and I appreciate it. And I think you appreciate too how much this means It's not ridiculous. It means a lot to these residents, and it will mean a lot, quite likely, to residents in your wards come the future. A couple of things. Firstly, what's being asked here is that these things be considered in a report, because we appreciate as councillors that these officers need to go away. They need to receive your petitions, they need to close look, they need to prepare their report. The important thing here was that a report come back, because in the initial recommendation put up by the officers, they recommended that a report be prepared and only the primary petitioner be contacted. I think given that this is important and it potentially sets precedent, that it come back to council and that we understand what the officers are reporting on. Secondly, we are asking that it be considered. This is not a given. We're not asking for a tome by the 3rd of March, but that these points are considered, which I think is a healthy response and a sympathetic response to our residents. And I think that's about all I have to say in the response. I back to our beautiful Mayor.
I put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried.
Mayor, could we just explain what happened in case the gallery is not aware of what just took place, please?
I don't know that this is the time, councillor. Everyone can receive the minutes of the meeting. The motion as presented has been carried as per process. Okay. If people that came for that specific item would like to leave, now's a lovely opportunity. Thank you. We're going to move on. Thank you. Item 3.1, Banyule Futures Community Think Tank. There is one speaker on this item. A video message will now be played to Council on behalf of Melissa Murphy-Webster, who is speaking for the recommendation.
We're just having a little bit of technical issue getting that video up. I'm getting a signal that it's going to be just a couple of seconds. Yeah.
Overall, the priorities listed are adequate and consistent with what the community needs. I strongly agree with Priority 31 in regards to community engagement, as the current methodology has not been satisfactory. And I'd like to see Priority 32 also reflect that the Council should prioritise reducing spending to minimise financial burden on residents. Now, when I read under Theme 1, community spaces and services are welcoming and accessible to all with no barriers to inclusion or participation. I'm not going to lie, I got quite emotional. I witnessed severe exclusion, including to some very vulnerable members of the community who were unable to access basic food items during 21 and 22. In addition, I was witness and victim to name-calling by several councillors and council staff. And for this reason, I hope these words remain steadfast and Banyule truly walk the walk. We don't want to hear gaslighting that deflects blame or makes excuses. You just need to know that there's still some strong feelings associated with this. Lastly, having one culture or race elevated and recognised above others is not inclusive behaviour. Our community is strong and diverse because of the people who live here. We have a rich history shaped by the contribution of both native-born Australians, immigrants, as well as the native-born people of the First Nation community. 5 of the 6 themes prioritise First Nation community and businesses. The notion that other communities or cultures cannot meaningfully contribute on the same topics have historical or current value or be encouraged in the pursuit of self-determination is erroneous. Moreover, ancestry does not automatically determine one's knowledge base. Rejecting knowledge grounded in empirical evidence in favour of heredity, in my opinion, will not help Banyule effectively address environmental and sustainability efforts. I do hope that the think tank members take time to re-evaluate this faux pas and make changes necessary to make this fully inclusive.
Councillors, there's an officer's report before you. I'm now calling for a motion. Moved, Councillor O'Kane, seconded Councillor Garotti. Councillor O'Kane, do you wish to speak?
I just have some brief comment. I want to thank the participants for their valuable input into what was, by all accounts, an extraordinarily positive process in which participants gave their utmost. Thank you also to the officers and consultants who facilitated the process in such a professional and to such an effective level to achieve these outcomes in just 4 sessions. These outcomes will, of course, be guiding directives and interpreted into Council's key strategic documents as they are reviewed over the next few months. I am particularly grateful to this extraordinary quality community-centred guidance, not only as I work to fulfil my elected mandate in Olympia, but as I conduct my duties as a councillor of Banyule. As representatives of Banyule's community, they have reinforced the ground upon which council will walk.
Thank you, Councillor. Does a seconder wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Very happy to speak. Firstly, just to acknowledge the investment in time and effort that were made by the Banyule Think Tank community members, and I can see a few in the audience here today, and I really enjoyed sharing our moments together formally at the Think Tank, but also informally when we were able to break the coffee and tea and just have those conversations. Evander, great to see you here, and Callum as well, and I know there are a few others. Sorry if I can't recall your name. But I think it's just a testament to the fact that community think tank members have turned up around the commitment that you have toward this process. Some great ideas generated and great feedback to the council. We are just noting it though tonight because 9 of us all went through a process just 3 or 4 months ago where I think over 100,000 people had input into what they would like their city to be through a process called the 2024 council election. And the 9 of us here all heard quite strong and clear themes from our community members directly around what they want to see. And so the objective now for council is to overlay the terrific work, foundational work of the think tank, combined with analysis and insight from our officers. But in my mind, most critically, what we heard through our community through the election process and what we're elected here to do. And so we will bring those 3 elements together and we will table what I hope is a very strong council plan and budget to take this city into the future over the next 4 years. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Di Pasquale.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Councillor Garotti has acknowledged those people who are on the think tank. I just want to acknowledge, on behalf of the community, to their devotion, dedication, the amount of time they put forward, unpaid, volunteered, 4 days, an extraordinary effort. It really goes to show that those who took part in that and put their hand up for that really do love our community, but also are invested in the future of where our community is going. I think that is very important because our community, we are building it. We have the community vision coming up. We have the budgets and plans going forward over 10-year periods, but we do want people who are thinking larger than that because we want people to understand that they're raising their kids here, their grandkids here, and they want Banyule to be a place where they're proud of and proud to raise their families. So, yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge those people who really took part and put their time forward because it really says something on behalf of our whole community. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Curry.
Thanks, Mayor. So acknowledging that I of members of our think tank in the room, so thank you for turning up. Lovely to have had a session. I've attended 2 of the sessions. The session number 3, I sat every time. It was a serious commitment by the members of the think tank, so 55 members that committed to their community 24 hours. I was really impressed by the diversity of views that we heard, but also that some people had to relinquish those views so that we could achieve a common goal. So I do acknowledge that I heard those alternative views, and we are considering many more views before we adopt our. And some of the things that have come out of the think tank is we are starting to view the public health as a lens that we view all of our plans through. And I think by doing that, we can highlight some of the themes and some of the priorities. And I acknowledge that a lot of the people gravitate to the sustainability table in the 4th session. And so I was really pleased to see it acknowledges that in Banyule, we are very caring and we really want to take care of our environment and produce a better future for all. I was also impressed that some of the new terminology that was suggested that we consider, and one of those was best health. It acknowledges that not everybody has the same achievement. We don't all aspire to the same thing. And I'd like to see some of that more inclusive terminology as we move forward to make some of our services accessible to all, make sure that we don't have any missing gaps in health where we could be doing more. And I really appreciate it. I have one question, if I may. Thank you. There's a session that's coming up through you, Mayor. There's a session that's coming up March 25. I'd like to know through the appropriate officer or director whether the councillors are invited.
Does the director community want to respond?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I believe the answer that facilitated. I will.
Thank you, councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to all the participants in the think tank. I attended some of the earlier meetings and I'm delighted now to read as an outcome the 34 priorities that have come out of this think tank. This level of engagement, which I do consider meaningful, because it gives our community face-to-face exposure with officers and councillors, and it also gives time. Much more meaningful, I think, than responding to a survey on a website. So I'd like to see us engage in more of this type of community consultation, even though we've just spoken about the human resources required for public forums and community consultation. I do believe that this is what the public expects of us. And when I look at just the range of priorities that the think tank has produced, it reminds me one of the main reasons that people actually choose to live in this city, and that is because of the beautiful environment of Banyule. Strengthening and increasing community environment engagement, and also the concern around responding to extreme weather events. Climate change is here, that's acknowledged, and we now need to look at a lot more adaptive means, and also the focus on much more and varied community engagement methods. So this community is asking for a lot more than the 3 R's. Rake, roads and rubbish are important. I think we do them pretty well. And we need to be mindful when we're questioning council services and facilities that these 34 priorities need to be considered as part of the overall package, because this is what you, the community, are asking for.
Does any other councillor wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I did show up at a couple of the Saturday sessions and had a listen, and I sat with some of the residents and sat back and had a listen. And I would actually like to thank the officers who've made this possible as well. There's been a lot of consideration, a lot of thought, a lot of vision in the background, lots of conversations amongst our officers, and they're still working on it. Obviously, they're doing the next step, point number 4. So there's a lot of work done by our council officers, and I know many of you connected with them very well. So I would like to thank them for everything that they have done to make this happen well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Does any other councillors wish to speak?
Yeah, I would also like to thank both the staff that were involved to set that environment up for an engaging participation of a tremendous cross-section of our community that were working in collaboration and hearing each other out, work through complex subject matter and come to a balanced approach on everything we do on council. One thing during an election process, you hear extreme views thrown at you regularly throughout that process. But what this process does is it takes us to a balanced, well-considered, collaborative approach to coming to a point at which can help us do a job that represents everyone in Banyule. So I think this is a really healthy element that goes into directing us into the future. Us as councillors, we engage on a daily basis with residents and their concerns as well. And what I've heard through my experiences in consultation and election process is very similar to what the recommendation coming out of those public consultations. And some of the proposals in there were tremendously rich and valuable, and I'll remember going forward. But there's also the offer, I think, potentially of continuing the connection with that important group. A few are here tonight, maybe to push us to keep you guys going as well. But I'm supportive of that ongoing dialogue with that group because it was wonderful. And I must say, I think my first experience before with council was on one of those consultations for city plan, the first experience I ever had with being a city council. So who knows? It's a rich place to get a good understanding of council.
Thank you, councillor. I might just add a few comments. It's been a thorough journey for all the 55 community members, and I echo what my fellow councillors have said. The recommendation of really important priorities and principles for council is what we need to focus on for the next 4 years. So we will respond to this, and we are interested in your aspirations for the future. And this process enables council to embed these things across the organisation. Very happy about that. So we put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item 3.2, the 6 monthly advocacy report. There are 3 speakers on this item, and we have first Michelle Jovis, From Friends of Banyule, she'll address in person. She knows what to do.
Thank you. Friends of Banyule supports Council's advocacy. We are pleased that Council is taking carriage tree replacement on behalf of NALP because we're hoping for more appropriate species selection and ongoing maintenance and irrigation is necessary. However, Council must do more. We are hoping that Council will advocate to end the use of North East Link's non-disclosure agreements affecting residents and businesses for financial compensation, respite accommodation, home improvements such as double glazing of windows, etc. And as it is totally unnecessary, it is totally unacceptable and inherently unfair, as those that are the best negotiators get the best deal, and it also masks the incompetence of the project management because they don't fix what doesn't get seen in public. We're also expecting advocacy to protect Calparan Lake from NALP polluted stormwater runoff, which I've raised repeatedly at the North East Link CLG community meeting. We're also hoping for advocacy to dislodge Calparan Lake at North East Link's cost and for NALP to protect its function as retarding basin for flood mitigation. At the moment, the amount of sediment and sludge is compromising that function and it's also impacting the Yarra River via Plenty River. We're also looking for air monitoring and analysis and air monitoring for dust and analysis of de-identified health records of respiratory health and stress for the hundreds or thousands of families impacted by NALP from dust and diesel emissions, constant noise and excessive lighting. And finally, do have another couple of items, but I'll cut it short, that for Council to advocate for an end to mandatory memorandums of understanding for Council staff that Council staff must sign in order to get any information from North East Link. These insidious documents result in Council staff not being able to discuss the information with councillors or the community,
Please
which is
sum
an
up, Michelle.
outrageous attack on transparent democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle Jovis. Our next speaker is Pippa Griffith. She will address Council in person and also knows the process. Thank you, Pippa.
Thank you. I'm supporting this motion, although I wonder how the second point, reporting on the advocacy undertaken for each priority, be included on the website, is to be done. Where will it be on the website? I'm raising this because searching the website for the term Advocacy Framework and Action Plan, exactly as printed in the officer's report, produced no result. Unfortunately and frustratingly, this is not the first time something like this has happened. Surely, if there's a reference to such a plan, you should be able to find it easily on the website. The term advocacy on its own took me to a page called Advocacy Priorities, which tells us there are 27 key priorities. This report tells us there's 28. That said, I am pleased to see that things are still happening with both the Ivanhoe Station and the Owenwall Bridge issue, although I'm not holding my breath. We really do need better public transport across the north already, and it also makes sense to reconsider the curbside glass collection, so I hope you can get them to see sense on that. Just a few things. And it's really great to see a couple of green ticks showing that things have been achieved. What's really interesting to me is the next step in the housing services priority, which is develop a list of preferred locations for affordable housing development to support the state and federal governments reaching housing targets. Is this a list just within the Bell Street Mall area, or is it to be Banyule-wide? And I hope it will be created with a lot of consultation with the local community. And finally, you've made a very positive start on the most important advocacy of all about the lack of consultation and democracy in our planning system. with your submission to the government's Activity Centre program and the Future Homes Urgent Motion actions late last year. Keep it up, because this is becoming a really important issue and it's not on this list.
Thank you, Pippa. Our next speaker is David Mulholland. He will address the council in person. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Mayor. Night of I do have a couple of comments. First, on the Bell Street Neighbourhood Mel Activity Centre. Certainly the $250,000 to develop a neighbourhood activity centre master plan is welcome, but does appear to be several years late, given that the state have already approved massive 10-storey towers along Bell Street, the east Aldi, and also the other developments already occurred around Mel. On the northeast link trees, the report is actually silent on how many established trees have been removed during the construction of the northeast link, as residents now look at the barren, dusty wasteland of the northeast work site. I certainly agree with Michelle's comment about non-closure agreements being signed. However, although welcome, 2,199 trees appears to be a drop in the bucket and a bit of a sop council by the North East Link Authority, noting that only 699 of the North East Link site and 1,500 elsewhere in Banyule. In addition, are these established trees, saplings and what type? The Greensboro Transport Interchange, whatever happened to the integrated transport interchange that was planned for Greensboro? It would appear the council has lost an opportunity here, with the site chosen being across the other side of Para Road. On the glass recycling service, as someone who has certainly had has expertise in this area, I ask a simple question: who benefits from this major expenditure for the council? Given that we now have container deposit legislation for all glass containers, the benefits of the additional glass bin are minimal. Council needs to fight back strongly against this impost on behalf of the ratepayers and residents. One last point on advocacy. There are more, most of the attachments mentioned were about advocacy with Labor state MPs in Banyule. And if the winds of change are anything to go by Saturday's by-elections, I think council would be very wise to widen their advocacy to include all MPs, all local MPs, certainly Greens upper house MPs.
Thank you. Councillors, as an officer report, Councillor
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to move the report. Like to commend the work of officers in pulling it together. I will point out that tonight,
Slide, do you have a question? I'll just
moving it.
move. Do I have a seconder?
Yes.
Seconded, Councillor McKern.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so just like to note the attendance tonight of Mr. Chris Parr, the federal Liberal representative contesting the upcoming election. I understand, Mayor, yourself and the Chief Executive met with Chris earlier this year and presented a list of advocacy items, which I think is terrific and probably speaks to a point made by Mr. Mulholland around the importance of council engaging with all levels of government and with all different political persuasion, because it is a dynamic landscape, as we know, and we need to have the advocacy out there to everyone. Chris, I certainly hope the council's been able to arm you with some information, and we are actually hoping that you can step up to the plate and come up with some commitments for this community. So that's a task for you. But this is a good advocacy report. It shows the council is working toward a number of initiatives across the two levels of government. One thing that we need to be conscious of as a council is how we prioritise and keep a close view on priority and not allowing that list to blow out. Because in our discussions with state and federal, We want to be laser focused on what the key things are for our community and where we can have best bang for buck in terms of that advocacy approach. And that is something that we're going through as a process as council at the moment, and certainly look to work with the community on that and key stakeholders within this room. I've mentioned Chris, Mr Grace, President of Good Governance Banyule, Mr Kevan Hill, Banyule Ratepayers Action Group. There's a lot of community leaders here tonight that we can draw on in that process, and we look forward to having that conversation. Two things I just want to specifically highlight out of the report. The Bundoora Bowls Club, we're looking to have Bowls Victoria set up there in terms of their head office. That would be massive for the Bundoora community. And I know that we've been talking to Mr Colin Brooks about that opportunity, but that would be big. And what that would do too would help showcase the benefits of the North East Link, because one of the reasons Bowls Victoria want to set up there is because they can see the future that once the North East Link is built, Bundoora is ideally positioned both from a metro and regional perspective to operate as a bit of a hub. So big one to push through. The other one in our pack, and I know Councillor Di Pasquale and I think we're focused on this almost every day as councillors, is the Watsonia train station redevelopment and getting something done. And that is our job, and we will fight hard for that. And looking at people in this room, we're looking for support from you in those efforts. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Does the seconder wish to speak? Councillor McKern.
Thank you, Mayor. This report does indeed express the depth and breadth of council advocacy efforts and how Banyule priorities are tracking. And thank you to the officers for it and our advocacy staff who approach the task with passion. I want to focus my comment on an advocacy piece regarding Ivanhoe Station accessibility, which one of the speakers did mention. I believe this should be a key priority, the poor accessibility of which is of increasing community concern, given that no disability access is provided for, and this is now escalating in terms of the attention it's receiving from the media. Recently on ABC Radio, this is how an interview went. Like many students about to start university, Lily is mapping out her route on public transport. Lily is totally blind. She says her local station at Ivanhoe is impossible because it's not fitted with the round raised circles on the ground that assist her to navigate the platform as a blind person. Indeed, Ivanhoe Station and Heidelberg Station are the only two stations on the Hurstbridge line without tactile ground surface indicator. You know, those little dots that you find throughout public space. These tactile markers let those that are blind or have low vision use trains safely. Without them, it's practically too dangerous to use Ivanhoe Station. Lily told the ABC using Ivanhoe Station is anxiety-inducing, and that instead she has to walk 30 minutes to the next station along. While she has been advocating, she says she hasn't got enough of a response from me, the ward councillor, from Anthony Carbines, or from Kate Waits MP. Well, I'd like to inform Lily, if I can, that we are trying to do things here at council, and I will, through you, Mayor, ask the good Director of Community Services to comment on what this council is doing.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. There are a number of things that officers have undertaken on that particular matter as described by Councillor Kern. Amongst those is an inconsistencies in relation to compliance with policy frameworks in relation to disability rights of design. We, as officers, have run assessment United Right Persons with a Disability, the Disability Discrimination Act, the Equal Opportunity Act, Disability Support. So there will be some correspondence draft on behalf of the Council forward also.
Thank you to the Director. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Di Pasquale.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do want to acknowledge Michelle Purtle, who's the officer bringing together and the advocacy lead bringing this together really on behalf of the community. This is not necessarily, I don't consider this an advocacy list that councillors have put together or anything like that. This is the community have been speaking for a long time. Officers put together reports and then advocacy comes out of that. And I think one of the things that sometimes frustrates the community with regards to democracy is that politicians get voted in and out every 3 years, 4 years. And that's a good part of democracy, but the problem with that is the long vision is sometimes lost. So when we ask for politicians to think, 10 years ahead, 20 years ahead, it sometimes fails because most politicians are thinking about just getting elected or re-elected. And that becomes a problem with democracy. But here you have a list that spans time over many years. So I'd be suggesting that our local community can really hang their hat on this advocacy list in the event, and when we move forward to the federal election, the upcoming state election as well, they can be quizzing the candidates on advocacies that local council are overseeing. Okay, so many of these things are not part of council's local council's core business, but it is important that local council advocates on that, and that all levels of government extend that time frame from 4 years to 8 years, 12 years and beyond. So I just want to put a bit more emphasis on this advocacy list of how important it is. And I find it a little bit concerning that it wasn't easy to find on the website. I think it needs to be more accessible. I think it needs to be more documents out there, hard copies, single pages, but I think this is something that we'll take on and probably move out, considering time and space we are in with a couple of elections coming up very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. If I just carry on with the comments of Councillor Di Pasquale, another frustration from our community is the different layers of government and where the remit is. And one of our speakers earlier made a really valid point of it works when people or areas of government and private sector are collaborating. And so where our remit stops, we need to be a voice. And we heard that in the first item tonight. So I'm really proud of the advocacy efforts of this council that's certainly come before my time. And importantly, pleased what's going forward. I mean, there's 28 there. It could be 58. There could be 150. There's a lot of important issues. But when we're thinking about things like family violence, mental health, homelessness, these are the issues that hit hard locally. And whilst local council can't fix it on their own, if we're collaborating, advocating, we're doing a good job. So with that, just wanted to point out two particularly, just commend the work of officers in this space, particularly in the prevention of family violence. And the other one is North East Link, albeit it might not seem like it. Council is working really hard in the North East Link space. And we've been working behind the scenes in terms of being able to communicate that a little bit better. Myself and Councillor Curry pushing hard in this space, and there's a lot of different topics. I'm not going to make this a North East Link conversation, but rest assured we are pushing really hard in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Curry.
Mayor, so I want to acknowledge a couple of comments that have been made by the speaker. We did some recent advocacy from Future Homes, which was in December, and I'll ask the question in a moment where we'll see that appear. In the meantime, when we did the advocacy, we wrote to our local members. I discovered that it was a bit unusual for us to cast our net across the political spectrum to capture the upper house, but those letters went with the Future Homes advocacy. We captured 8 local members, and so we captured the upper house. We've asked for a response, which will come back to council. Hopefully a report will come back next month or so. Secondly, I'd like to acknowledge Michelle Jovis for her dedicated long-term work, and a member of the CLG, and for those that know, that's the Community Liaison Group, which has a specific role with North East Link to get information, provide information from the community about what issues are coming up at the local end. covering off Daniel and the other LGAs. And she worked tirelessly at that role, and I think we can capitalise on some of that connect with Michelle to understand our role further. Thirdly, I'd like to recognise that as we saw in our item 2.1, the petition, advocacy is an absolutely key piece of work that Council should do, and we will be reviewing those priorities, and I really look forward to exploring what the options are there. Again, I always look for bang for buck. What can we do to make the most impact, and what will be to the benefit and the best benefit to our residents? Thank you, and I might follow up that question. The Director, please, when will we see the Future Homes advocate?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. We do have a report coming back. We're almost 100% sure to the next council meeting on the actions in relation to advocacy for the Future Homes. And once that's progressed, then that detail would then be captured in subsequent advocacy reports under colleagues as we progress through that process.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak?
Just like to notice or point out that there's significant work in advocacy in every day we work on council. But here is just a summary of some of the key things. A number of these items are worth millions of dollars to our residents. The watermark electrification is worth millions of dollars to our residents. The glass, not shifting to 4-bin glass system, is worth millions of dollars. So it's really important, this work we do, and I think we've articulated some of those big items that we can get an alignment between both local and federal and state members on the same page to maximise our opportunity to have support on things that are very hard to do. So I think this sits with both the Mayor and the CEO. This is a really important document for them to do advocacy work. And while some of these have green dots on them, doesn't mean we've achieved things. It means we've taken steps in getting somewhere. So it is highly complicated. If you want to have a chat with us about these and get further information, get in contact with Michelle Purtle. And if you think other things should be on this, take the opportunity to speak to your councillors and probably the Mayor of the day as well.
Thank you, councillor. Do any other councillor wish to speak? No, that's everyone. I might add a few comments. I just wanted to highlight that council has to be and is forward-thinking and prepared when the federal state government announce funding pools that councils need to tap into. We have to be ready, and we have to present the need, we have to present the fact, and to some extent the plan in a variety of detail. So we're currently negotiating with the North East Link for those trees that were mentioned before, the 2,199 trees, to replace some of what was lost during the construction. And this is the sort of critical work, and I know a lot of our councillors are advocating for this, to ensure that our municipality does stay green and sustainable. I put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Okay. Item 3.3, award of contract for minor civil works panel for projects up to $300,000. There are no speakers on this item. There's an officer report. Moved Councillor Grotti. Do I have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Wood. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Happy to support and good work. We've got a panel now. They're for works that are under 300,000. One conversation that we just had with the Director of Corporate Services and the Chief Executive, and it can be picked up when the procurement policy is reviewed and updated, but whether or not that threshold can go up to 500,000. With the cost index escalation that's occurred within construction, 300,000 now is a very low threshold for a full public tender. when we've got a panel now of 5 or 6 providers, 5 providers there who would go through a competitive quotation process. And so that's part of our job as councillors, is to help the executive simplify things so that when we get a capital budget adopted, we can get it delivered. But with that, happy to support this recommendation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick note to acknowledge the work that was done in this process. It was a detailed tender process, and there was some commercial and confidence report that went through it, and the detail certainly stacks up for this recommendation. So supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item 3.4, Audit and Risk Committee Minutes and Annual Report. There is one speaker on this item. Kevin Hill from the Banyule Ratepayers Action Group will address council in person and is speaking against the recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a bit unfair. I'm pretty happy with the report. There were just a couple of points I wanted to highlight. Just going straight to the lifeblood of council in terms of its cash flows, budget. We talked at a meeting several meetings ago about forecasting and some of the obvious weaknesses in the forecasting processes and methodologies. The question I've got, which I'll put back through you, Mayor, is what have we done in terms of assessing the risk to our enterprise risk, therefore strategic, if those forecasts have big wobbles? In other words, we don't have a clue as to the worst and best case outcome. So I'll just sort of leave that. This is not a hit list, by the way. This is trying to help. So that flows on to strategic risk. I'd like also to talk about safety and wellbeing, just very briefly. One of the things that I'm really concerned about is what's been played out on the news about hate speech and anti-Semitism and so on. I think we're playing into the hands of a dangerous situation when we tolerate protests for Palestinians. I'd advocate strongly to the council that take that straight off the agenda, because you have to look at that as the safe and well-being issue, also a duty of care issue. There's been increasing violent crime in the mall in 3081. There are no PSOs, no permanent police present, and I wonder in terms of advocacy whether council something about that. There is an issue about drop and collect vehicles in residential areas, and whether those vehicles should be in residential streets, possibly packed places or whatever, you don't know. Why can't they be allocated to a place where there's no nearby residences, etc.? So I just would highlight that. And finally, I'd just like to talk about internal audit report about life expectancy of roads. The life expectancy should be determined to go down, and therefore the depreciation should go up. And in terms of risk, council proposes to by not spending enough money, in our opinion, on repairing the roads over a 4-year cycle is highlighted by not driving life expectancy, repurposing the roads and increasing the depreciation. That's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Garotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And through yourself, I just had a question for our councillor delegate for the committee. In fact, 2 questions, but the first, were there any issues arising from the Audit and Risk Committee that warrant being brought to the attention of this council? And the second, the minutes reference work done on strategic risks coming back to the council, seeking advice on what the time frame for that is. Through you, Mayor.
The 2 delegates, Councillor Wood, would like to respond.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Grody, for your question. I'll move the motion. Can I answer those at that time?
Yes, you may.
Comments?
Included in your time limit. Yes.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Moved, Councillor Wood. Do I have a seconder? Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Curry. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks again, Councillor Garotti. I'll come to your questions. Good, obvious questions. So firstly, I just note that the minutes are presented are true and accurate. Just a couple of key points. So Marilyn Kearney's been appointed chair, and I can confirm that she's suitably experienced, qualified and appropriate appointment. Chair comes with great experience, and that detail's in the minute. Both myself and Councillor O'Kane were encouraged by the level of detail and scrutiny that's undertaken by the Audit and Risk Committee. Specifically, a couple of examples of that is in the safety and wellbeing space. We had a really close look at work cover cases, which pleasingly are on decline. Shows the ability of council to be able to appropriately place people back into the workplace with such a diverse environment. There was getting to your question, Councillor Grotti, there was a rise in reported near misses and hazards, quite a spike, but once we questioned that, it actually talked to an improved methodology and working space that allows our staff to better report these incidents. So, not saying that there's more of them happening, they're just being recorded and dealt with in a much better way. Good news story. There's a couple of there was a handful of if I can say minor examples that showed up, which officers have taken away in the local government framework reporting. As an example, our response in the animal welfare space was obviously out of whack from the sector standard. So the committee made those points to officers, and there was another few of those, but nothing of any significance. The committee noted North East Link to be our most significant strategic risk at this time, and the organisation within that meeting committed to fulfilling a duty of care in relation to North East Link to meet the obligations and collaboratively work with them to ensure risk and exposure is managed appropriately. To your question of timing, we expect the reply briefing to come back to Council 20.
Thank you, Councillor. Does the seconder wish to speak? No? Councillor Grotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick comments. First, I'd just like to thank Councillor Wood and Councillor O'Kane for stepping up onto the committee. And by all accounts, we're hearing that you're doing terrific work. Feedback from that committee was that engaged onto it and really good advocates for this council and for the community. So I would just like to pass on our thanks as a group of councillors for the two of you stepping up to those roles, particularly as first-term councillors. And as I said, from what we've heard, doing a very good job. Thank you. And secondly, as always, I really do appreciate hearing feedback from the community, and in this case, Kevan Hill from Banyule Ratepayers Action Group. And I note that a few queries were raised there just around budgeting and forecasting and strategic risk. And I know that our committee delegates will reflect upon that feedback, as they do from all members of the community, and we do as a council, and we'll certainly be conscious of that. So thank you, Kevan.
Thank you, Councillor Grotti. I did mean to make that point. Thank you, Kevin.
Councillor O'Kane.
Through you, Mayor. As a new councillor and new to this process, thank you for the vote of confidence, because it is a steep learning curve, but something that I think we can all bring various experience to and our critical minds to. I just want to second what Councillor Wood was saying. I'd like to put in a quick thank you to Marilyn Kearney for stepping up, nominated as the committee chair, but also to Greg Rimmer Holliman, who's staying on as a councillor, will be leaving us at the end of this term, but helping with maintaining some kind of continuity when there's been such a turnover of committee members. In addition to what Councillor Wood was saying about the actual content and the reports that we covered. I'd like to commend the Director for Assets, who gave us quite a I suppose, meaningful discussion on the culture of safety and how it trickles down through our organisations. Certainly left an impact on me. I don't get up on my chair to get anything anymore. And also, lastly, just to respond to increasing violence at Bell Street Mall, which is of concern. We are having discussions about that and looking to have meetings and see what can be done. There is exploration actually going on at the moment, because it is of high concern to myself, but also other councillors.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? I'd also like to mention the new chair, Marilyn Kearney, that she's very experienced in this space, particularly around public sector challenges. So that's very useful for us as a council. As Councillor Wood mentioned, the new group, the councillor group, we're going to review our strategic risk register and keep on top of the changing environment that councils work in. Emerging issues do arise, and as the report states, the biggest emerging issue is the North East Link project, and as listed as the most significant strategic risk, with concerns around parking, noise, and potential liability. So we are looking forward to that discussion coming soon. I put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item 3.5, record of councillor meetings. There are no speakers. There's an officer report. I'm calling for a motion, councillor. The remover moved Councillor Champion with the amendment. Would you like to take us through that?
I can do that, Mayor. Council receives and notes the record of councillor meetings report as detailed in this officer report, with an amendment to the record of councillor attendance for Banyule Community Think Tank Session 4, meeting held on the 7th September 24, to reflect Mayor Councillor Elizabeth Neely arriving at 11:30am, Councillor Mark Di Pasquale arrived at 1:30am, and Sel.
You've been added to the report.
Wonderful,
yep.
Thank you. So moved.
Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Wood. Would you like to speak to the item?
I won't.
Would you like to speak? Any other councillor wish to speak? I put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The report is carried. Moving on to our well-built city. Item 6.1, Planning Panel Report, Heidelberg Structure Plan. There are 4 speakers on this item. And thank you, Councillor Curry, for getting my attention.
To grow a little bit. Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to excuse myself due to the conflict of interest I declared earlier in the meeting.
Thank you. So we have 4 speakers on this item. Wendy Palliser from Heidelberg High will address council in person and is speaking against the recommendation. Thank you, Wendy. Please approach the lectern. Thank you, Wendy. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Yes. As you know, I'm Wendy Palliser, submitter to the planning panel and representing the 176 petitioners, residents of the Heidelberg Heights area in the activities precincts, and we're against the unnecessary change in zoning that will affect house frontage changes, side fences that are a couple of metres at the moment, and frontages brought forward with a 7, like next to me will be a 7.1 metre wall of a building, changing the street landscape. The petitioners are the protectors of their leafy tree-lined suburb, which is in essence a neighbourhood character area. I would like to thank the panel for their recommendations of mandatory building heights of 11 metres, and the panel stating that the provisions relating to our area could result in potentially confusing zoning provisions, particularly in the ACZ2, whom planning said need consideration. They couldn't address it because there was no representation. So I asked, but representation and appropriate notice and opportunity for their views should be considered. So that falls to this council, and I ask if they have done that due diligence. I believe the Cookie Cut Activity Centre plan presented to the panel lacked detail, which prompted an apology from your representative, more likely lacked detail on its inception. Thus, the zoning needs to be set aside until the area community of the AC is consulted, and actually the boundaries, which don't align with planning Melbourne of GRZ, general residential zones, being in an activity centre zone. So that will impact us. And considering you're looking at open space and you are a development council and this is your plan for what you see as a park, a corner park, look particularly to the area of James Reserve and the open space area, if you stay in the activity centre in the GRZ zone, could in future impact us by realigning it with the the ACZ and change that, which would enable you to sell off out part of our reserve. Thank you.
Thank you. A written statement will now be read out on behalf of Dean Denali, I hope I pronounced that correctly, by Mark Gilio, Director of Corporate Services. Dean is also speaking against the recommendation.
I refer to the planning report in relation to the proposed amendments affecting ACZ2, Heidelberg Central Sub-Precinct 3B, item 5.3-3, page 101, in relation to 70 Yarra Street only. My main objective is the proposed increase of the building height to 28 metres or 8 stories from the current 20 metres or 6 stories as recommended by the planning panel. I live at 75 Yarra Street, sub-precinct 6B. Maximum building height 13.5 metres or 4 stories. I've lived there since 1999. I'm happy to stay in this place. My property fronts 70 Yarra Street, Ralinda Proprietary Limited site, and living will probably become a nightmare if it's extensively developed. Yarra Street is generally populated by low-rise residential houses and units throughout this length. Any building height above 4 stories is out of character to its surroundings. The potential development at 70 Yarra Street, which is on a higher ground to most of the AZC2 precinct, and the building height increase will make it even more dominant in the area. Ralinda Proprietary Limited justification to the panel for a higher building height in Yarra Street is not comparable to the residential high-rise development at 100 Mount Street. Mount Street faces the station and car park. There's a bus station nearby with commercial offices around, and the road has high vehicular traffic. I also refer to my submission dated 12th December 2022 to the Council for more details of my objections. I request the Council to keep to the current height limit set in Sub-District 3B to 20 metres or 6 stories, and preferably to 17 metres or 5 stories, similar to the adjacent Sub-Precinct 3A.
Thank you.
Mayor, I've got a question for the relevant Director of City Works regarding 70 Yarra Street. It's my recollection that that already has a permit on it. And a question to you, if you have the information, does this, if we adopt this planning panel recommendation, does that change the height that's possible to be built on that?
Through you, Mayor, I would have to put on notice because I don't confidently know the max height of that compared to the.
Okay, thank you. Michelle Jovis from Friends of Banyule will address council in person, speaking against the recommendation. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. This item is closely linked to the next item regarding council's submission to the State Government Activity Centre program, noting that Heidelberg, Ivanhoe, Rosanna, Watsonia and McLeod, etc. are not currently identified as part of Planning Authority's Activity Centre program. Soon will be. And what we have in the C172 planning amendment, delivering the State Government's Activity Centre program by stealth. That is preempting unfriendly, excessive expectations for growth and locking the community out, having their say in the size, height and neighbourhood and amenity. When the C172 planning proposal was put forward, it was suggested that only minor changes were envisaged. But what we have here is a structure plan without mandatory height limits, basically a structure plan with preferred height limits only, with plenty of discretion able to be applied, i.e. much higher will be applied for and potentially given the green light to. There are insufficient controls, and another point, there are insufficient controls on land subject to flooding regarding land assessed as having a 1% annual exceedance probability of flood. That is a 1% chance occurring in any year. And in a 1 in 100 flood, we all know that a 1 in year event are becoming more frequent with climate change and changes to. And this issue will increase the risk, placement and safety. I might finish.
Thank you, Michelle. Pippa Griffith will address council in person, speaking against the recommendation. Thank you, Pippa.
Thank you. It's very disappointing that the panel considered, and this is a quote from the report, the strategic work undertaken by council is not robust or appropriately comprehensive to justify any mandatory provisions. They said something similar more than once, even though they did accept the mandatory height limits for parts of Burgundy and Mount Street. That statement is particularly disappointing when we know council did a huge amount of hard work in preparing the document and that council was represented by a strong team at the planning hearing. I know because I took part in that hearing. So what does this mean? What is it that the panel requires for strategic work to be strong enough? And how will council approach such a future project? Next, I have concerns about the community consultation this time round. When applying online to speak on this issue, a box appeared telling me I would not be eligible unless I had previously made a submission, which I had, so I'm here. But not many other people had this opportunity this time. It's fundamentally undemocratic to exclude a large section of the community from being able to contribute to the discussion. One could maybe understand that if the amendment was unchanged, but there have been some significant changes. There are some higher preferred limits, we heard. For example, the residential areas abutting Yarra Street and Horden Street have been raised from 4 to 6 stories. And the Precinct 3B, which is generally between the more residential areas and the business areas, have gone from 6 to 8 stories. And these are preferred maximum heights, so they can be varied. Excluding those other community members means that those people who back then felt confident council had done a good enough job with the mandatory limit, admittedly mostly setback, building separations and street wall heights, and they could live with those, are now not able to contribute to the discussion, even though those things have changed. So unless you're intending to abandon this amendment, I ask you to consider postponing any decision to give the wider community an opportunity to contribute.
Thank you. Pippa.
I've got a question for the relevant officer on that regarding council's representation to put in mandatory controls. Could you speak to where the planning panel were unsatisfied with our representation?
Director Swan.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So in the panel report, there's particular consideration given in relation to the concept of mandatory and discretionary controls. So mandatory controls are guided by the state through two separate practice notes, one which broadly talks about the use of mandatory controls in a planning scheme in any context, and another that talks about it in the context of an activity centre. They set a reasonably high bar for where mandatory controls can be utilised and switched on, if you like. They don't provide a step-by-step guide as to how to meet that measure, so they are subjective as to whether you've done enough or not done enough. I guess as an indication of where the state and planning panels through that lens tends to stand with mandatory controls, the practice note then lists around 15 panel hearings where they haven't recommended using them as a guide for councils to go and have a look at where it hasn't worked. And that in part maybe forms a bit of a guideline, but it's different in every case and in every circumstance. You have to run an argument that there's an exceptional reason why a mandatory control should be achieved. We've been successful in one precinct in the activity centre zone, and as is outlined in the council report and in the panel report, you get mandatory height through the general residential zone that's built into the zone.
Thank you. Another question?
Sorry, this is a quick question for you, Mayor. Why was the consultation process limited to people who had previously contributed? Because people become engaged with processes at different times, and also, as the speaker mentioned, things do emerge at different times to affect different people.
Thank you, Councillor O'Kane. Director Swan?
Yeah, so if I could understand the point being made, I understand that when you go to a planning panel, you have to. So there is a statutory process, if you like, for how planning scheme amendments move through the system. And at different junctions, you have to have made a submission to be included in the process. The consideration for council is more a question of whether or not a council considers a change is too much to still be consistent with the planning scheme amendment intent. You've got basically two choices at the juncture, which is to abandon or put forward. The statute process doesn't give another option for further consultation. Just that.
Councillors, there's an officer report before you. I'm now calling for a motion.
Yes, I move with amendments. Could we put them up?
You take us through that, Deputy Mayor?
I'll move as is 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 with attachments noted. On item 6, advocate to the state government for investment in infrastructure that supports Heidelberg's increased density, specifically for increased investment for major upgrades to active transport, including cycling and pedestrian infrastructure. Part B, improved public transport infrastructure and service provision. And 7 notes that the new development contributions plan and open space levy review in progress will seek to allocate funds towards open space and public realm renewal priorities as identified within the Heidelberg Structure Plan This includes green infrastructure to improve the amenity and pedestrian experience. So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Castaldo. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor McKern. Councillor Castaldo.
Before I speak to the item, I'd like to ask an additional question, if possible, regarding if we don't accept this evening, the panel's recommendations, what is the risk if we're developing a development contributions project at the moment? If we don't adopt this and it's not accepted, what is the risk to getting that funding to improve services?
Director Swan, another one for you.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, Mayor. So Council has commenced the project to review its current development contributions plan and public open space levy. As part of the strategic justification when we develop those new plans, the next process, which is also a planning scheme amendment process, will have a regard to adopted strategies, frameworks and structure plans. If a structure plan isn't in place, it couldn't be considered through those processes because it wouldn't be considered, I guess, a going planning concern. And so it would weaken our ability to identify the capital work improvements to support the structure plan if it weren't in.
Does that answer your question,
Yes,
Deputy Mayor?
thank you, Mayor. Look, I'll speak to the item now. This is one very important item and I haven't taken it on lightly. Many conversations with officers, many conversations with the community, and I thank those that represented some views this evening. I'd like to acknowledge the significant work of all the strategic planners and professionals that have provided contributions all along the journey. Heidelberg is our biggest activity centre in Banyule and the place where the most new homes are being developed because Heidelberg has everything, just about. Public transport, parks, rivers, hospital and medical precinct, and great retail. The planning panel has undertaken their work scrutinising the planning submission we put forward. On the great majority, they've accepted the proposal put forward by council, including mandatory heights in the centre and also the residential parts around the boundaries. Some of the main variations were that the heights were adjusted south of Burgundy Street in the middle precinct, adding 2 additional floors, along with some mandatory maximum street wall heights, mandatory minimum building setbacks and building separation were not adopted, partially because of the high bar they put on defending putting in a mandatory control. While I'd prefer the panel to have adopted the council recommendation to the panel, I'm also confident that after the full process and the recommendation from our planning team, coming before us tonight, the recommendation, we've landed with the best structure plan given the state government and federal government's big Melbourne and Australia plans that we have little to say, have ability to influence. So I've turned my eye to the needs, the urgent needs to address the investment in the public realm and the provision of public services. And for that reason, the amendment I've put forward this evening, as we've heard the development contributions plan is coming up, where we seek to get income from future developments in the area and put that straight back into Heidelberg. And that is going to be needed significantly going forward to improve the public realm and service provision. Council will now need to work tirelessly to deliver this city centre that local and broader community can all enjoy, with both state and federal members, both in government, in the main street. I take every opportunity to push for their support in this centre, and I will continue to work tirelessly, hearing from residents. Quick remark on that 70 Yarra Street. I believe it is within the new structure plan heights, and they've got their permit from that. But this is an ongoing conversation, and developers are always going to push harder. We need to lock in something we can defend and something the state government will support. So I don't want unrealistic expectations from our community to think what we can expect for them. So I'm accepting the report with these minor amendments.
Thank you,
before us this
Deputy
evening.
Mayor. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Yeah. I'd like to comment that while I do hear the criticisms and comments against the recommendation, although that said, speakers wouldn't have seen the alternative motion put up, I am concerned that should we not accept and support this motion, that as Councillor Castaldo has mentioned, there are much bigger wheels at play here, particularly with the state government's push for its own planning agenda when it comes to housing provision. We know that 10 activity centre plans are proposed for 10 major activity centres around Melbourne. That was discussed in 2024. Another 25 now announced, and they will be put up for community consultation early this year. Now, at this point in time, Banyule is not implicated, but Banyule is very likely to have its turn, and I'll just speak about that further in the next item, and also invite direct comment at that time. So I think it's really important that we have these structure plans in place for our activity centres, because a lot of community time and effort has gone into their preparation. They've considered character, they've considered economic, social factors and planning factors. And whilst not everything is going to suit everyone, particularly what I'm hearing in relation to this amendment, I think that it is going to be important to have these structure plans in place if we're going to have a chance to maintain the integrity of individuality and uniqueness of each of our major activity centres, come the push for more generic cookie-cutter approach that the state government will hope to roll through in order to get through as many houses as possible. And I also want to thank Councillor Castaldo for the work he's put into this with residents, officers and fellow councillors.
Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor O'Kane.
Through you, Mayor. This has been an exceptionally difficult decision and has taken a lot of time and conversation, as Councillor Castaldo has said, with an incredible amount of deliberation and sweat and tears, really, I think. I recognise that a lot of hard work has gone into the development of this C1172 amendment, that it has passed through multiple stages over the last 4 years, and I am coming to it at the very last stages of this process. As we know, activity centres are designated by the state government, and that it is up to councils to design and have approved plans that best balance strong and conflicting demands, including intensifying populations, local topography, existing streetscape buildings, residents' needs, community expectations and environmental concerns. The building conditions imposed by the state government to determine activity centre conditions are considerable and constantly evolving. And I think that last point is important, and I think Councillor McByrne raised that. In this context, I have grappled with two main points. The first is the inclusion within the activity centre boundaries of part of Heidelberg Heights, particularly between Edward Street, St Helier Street, houses facing from Frederick Street and Montgomery and Thames Street south, that constitute the outer residential edges of the activity centre. Some residents have expressed concern that their environment that they live in is under threat of significant change, and through the adoption of this amendment. My second concern regards the taller heights set closer to the centre of the main centre. In particular, I'm concerned about the planning panel's recommendations to increase the heights from 6 stories. I recognise that these concerns are, can I have a moment? Increase
To sum up,
yeah,
more than a few minutes.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, bad choice of words. Sorry. For me, the decision was difficult. However, I landed on the following. It's my understanding that the zone protection on buildings in the part of Heidelberg Heights mentioned before remain the same as what is currently in place. I also keep in mind that the higher height limits towards the centre will indeed relieve pressure off the development in these marginal residential areas. But my overriding concern is when weighing up this decision, however, is the panel's comments around the possibility that in the future the state will review these limits in Heidelberg with the view of increasing them further.
Thank you, councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? We put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. We'll just wait for Councillor Curry to return to the chamber. Thank you. We might press on. We have all councillors in the chamber. Item 6.2, Banyule Council submission to the State Government's Activity Centre. There is one speaker on this item. Kevin Hill from the Banyule Ratepayers Action Group will address council in person and is speaking for the recommendation. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor, and hooray for this report. It's cogent, it's well-reasoned, and more than that, it's brave. Why did it have to be brave? Because the state Labor government imposing its will for council to comply with its vision will. Why is that so? Because it thinks it can bring efficiencies which it must get if it's going to repair its balance. So there's a motive for that is financial for them, also strategic in terms of future vote. I think there was a speaker before that said, you know, we need to keep an eye. If there is a change of government, maybe this sort of thing doesn't. Maybe it goes away, and we really need to seriously consider that and advocate accordingly to those other parties that are not yet involved. I don't want to say a lot about the detail of it, but I totally concur that the officers have been quite wise in the way they've put this, but it raises a question about why this all came about during the period of the council being suspended, if I could put it that way, during the pre-election period. Was that just by coincidence, or was that designed to happen? It's cynical, but you could cast a die and say that it would get up. So, again, this is a legacy of Dan Andrews. Senator Allen carrying on the charge. I'm not happy, but I'm happy to see council pushing back. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor McKern.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to move this motion if we're ready for that.
I wasn't sure. No questions? Whenever I think we're moving, there's a question. Thank you. Moved Councillor McKern. Do I have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Champion. Councillor McKern.
And thank you to the Speaker for his comments. I thoroughly concur. As a bit of background, as part of the government's housing statement, the state is working to deliver 60,000 new homes close to service, jobs and public transport in an initial 10 major activity centres across Melbourne. While the state government did do the planning for the 10 in 2024, another 25 major activity centres have now been announced, and they will be addressed in terms of community consultation, or what the state government calls community consultation, early this year. All towards, of course, the ultimate goal of 800,000 homes in the next decade. I note that while none of these major activity centres are located in Banyule at this time, there is valid concern that Banyule's 3 major activity centres in Ivanhoe, Greensborough and Heidelberg will at some point be implicated. The main issues that Council has contended in its submission regarding the state's activity centre program are these. Firstly, and quite rightly I believe, inadequate community consultation. And 2, I don't believe it was a coincidence that the first 10 were announced during and the consultation happened during the caretaker period last year. The generic planning approach that simplifies planning control and doesn't consider existing structured plans and activity centre control that have been developed in consultation with community and are responsive to economic, social, environmental, heritage, urban design factors that are particular to each centre. In other words, while we may not agree with everything in each structure plan, essentially they are a good attempt to make each centre and recognise the uniqueness and the character of each centre. Council has requested through this submission more engagement, which is right and proper, so that the Council and the community has clear and significant role on the ACP, information as to how the ACP or Activity Centre program will interact with and support our approved structure and activity centre plans, and information as to how the ACP will support much needed additional infrastructure, and of course better policy around the provision of affordable housing. I want to thank the officers for this report and submission to the DPP. I think it's thorough and well expresses our concerns as a council, even though we weren't here to discuss it at the time. And through you, Mayor, given that this is largely an officer's response, I would like to offer the Director of City Development an opportunity to comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I agree it was an interesting timing for this to be released. I think everything that we have to say is probably in the report and the attachments, so that caught me a bit off guard. But I do feel that there are significant elements of the Activity Centre program that are moving too quickly and in a manner that's not considering the local context, and is leaving a number of irreconcilable conflicts that certainly concern us. We note that the most recent release of activity centres that we've not been included, and it's hoped that our structure plan will continue on to success in the backdrop of this. So that's probably just something that's giving us pause.
Thank you, Director. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Very briefly, Mayor, thank you to our speaker for comments. Thank you to Councillor McKern for her comments with her movement. Thank you to Director Swan for her comments, and I concur with all of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Mayor. Very quickly, thanks to the Speaker. Thanks to the council officers for doing such a diligent job without board. It's hard to come out very specific pathway if councils aren't on board. Vote we want to take. We'll address this as part of our concern. I'd like to recognise that there are groups across Melbourne that are coming together that are opening up opportunities for resident groups in Melbourne and across metropolitan rural areas. There was one over the weekend which brought together a number of groups, which I'm hearing feedback on. It was very good. There's a lot of discontent because we are getting passed by. It seems we don't want to become token councillors on the bench. We want to make sure that we put across the views and represent our communities fully and thoroughly. And so we need to do more work in this space, and I look forward to creating some problems.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any other councillor? Councillor Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank all of the responses to this item, particularly the officers. As Councillor McKern noted, they've really covered off a lot of important ground in their report there. And this is some of the context in which I'm considering the importance of moving our Heidelberg Structure Plan forward, locking that in and defending that, because that was built on local knowledge and a response that tries to consider all the important features of that locality. These things are moving very fast forward, that the state government's trying to do, because they're trying to deliver so many homes so quickly and inside the city boundaries. So we are finding ourselves in a ridiculous situation, I feel, that just abandons the 100 years of hard work we've put into developing neighbourhood characters and areas of character through Melbourne. And a key item on the previous agenda item was drawing attention to the important provision of infrastructure as these developments go in. And our officers have indicated the lack of consideration on how to do that. And this is why I think important work in the develop contribution scheme is so important, that we get on and move that one forward as quickly as possible and get our Heidelberg Structure Plan adopted, because these are worrying, and we'll be continuing as a group of councillors put this on the agenda when we speak to our state member. I'm certainly going to be speaking in person.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? I think it was summed up very well on my fellow councillors. We put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. We now move into general business. On my papers, Councillor McKern has an item.
Vale, Richard. I was saddened to learn of the passing of long-time resident and heritage architect Richard Peterson on the 15th of January. A long-time member of the Heidelberg Heritage Society, he was also a member of the National Trust Board between 1994 and 2000. Wrote 6 books, many specialist reports, articles, session journals, and presented conferences. He continued to work after his retirement in 2007. Richard was a heritage advisor at many councils, including being the first heritage advisor for the former city of Heidelberg. He was passionate about an Ivanhoe resident, and generously shared his knowledge and expertise to help our local. Closer to home, in the time that I knew Richard, I was just amazed that he provided so much energy and advice on so many topics regarding planning and urban design, even though for much of that time he was very ill. He always put community and the value of good design and the protection of heritage before his own personal health and problems. He was also a member of LGBTQIA+ Advisory Committee from 21 to 24. He provided support and advice for the Malcolm Road residents last year in their advocacy for heritage recognition, and he was a sound and solid contributor to the development of Banyul's new heritage. I conferred with Rick on so many topics, knowing that his advice was gold, head us in the right direction. We acknowledge an enduring debt to Richard for his many achievements, his passionate interest and contribution to Banyul's heritage, and his commitment to community engagement. He was kind, passionate, dedicated, and his generous support and unfailing enthusiasm will be sorely missed. Our condolences go out to Richard's family and
Thank you, Councillor McKern, for sharing that with us. Councillor Champion, you have an item of general business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Richard was a pleasure on the committee. Yeah, miss him. I participated in the Inclusive Employment Program, day one, last Friday, for our participants. So there are approximately 12 participants participating in this. They were introduced to myself, Councillors Wood and O'Kane, joined me on Friday, as well as senior officers. This is an opportunity for these participants to become workplace skilled in a field which interests them or which they believe they have certain skill levels. So these participants have applied to this innovative Banyule-inspired program after many rejections to previous job applications in other workplaces. One of the prerequisites. They have placements in Banyule Council for 6 months, which provides them with skills which are transferable to suitable organisations. So they work in different fields in Banyule Council. So the current participants are very excited about both the program as well as their futures. They actually have a vision. They see their futures. A job. They've got the opportunity for a job. Now, a job is not just to earn some money and participate in our economy. A job also allows us to contribute to others, provide value and to grow, just as humans and vocationally as well. So we're looking forward to partaking in their graduation in 6 months' time and hearing about their experience and how they've grown in this program and what's next for them. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. There are public questions. We've received 6 public questions, and if any members of the public are in the gallery who have a public question, they're welcome to approach the lectern and ask their question when their name is read out. For those who have a public question but are not present, their question will be included in the minutes of the meeting. The minutes will be available on our website later in the week. I ask people when they come up to stick to their question as much as they can. The first question is James Cooper from Lower Plenty in the gallery. Thank you, James. Please ask your question.
Sorry. This question is in relation to the parking sign at the Carter Reserve Off Street car park. That's the multi-level car park near Watermark. In particular, there's a large sign at the Flintoff Street entrance of this car park which states that level 3 is a 3P area between 8 and 6 on Monday to Friday and 8 to 1 Saturday. The sign is conspicuous, approximately 2 metres by 3 metres in size. The drivers are entering the car park. It makes no reference to any exceptions to the area being a 3P area. However, there's a section in this level, this car park, 27 spaces, which at some stage have been amended to half-hour parking. Now, this differs from the advice provided from the aforementioned.
Okay. If you could get to your question, please.
Yep. It is reasonable that the driver entering the car park to assume that that sign is appropriate, and as such, I'm asking if this sign can be amended to advise drivers of their obligations to check all signs when entering the car park, so as not to fine at the moment.
Thank you, James. We'll have a response from one of the directors.
Thank you.
Director Swan, surprising.
Surprising. And another one in my, and through you, Mayor, Council has a number of signs at the entry to Carter Street Reserve. The large sign that's being referred to does provide general information regarding each of the different parking levels. As you enter the car park, there is another specific area sign relating to level 3, which states 3-hour park set signed. We are currently updating signage in the area as part of recent parking changes in the car park, including this large sign, and the comments that you made will be considered as part of the signage update, and I think...
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Vince Fontana of Ivanhoe.
surrounding drainage and pit problems along Heidelberg Road. Those who are aware of the street or know the location, there's a substantial gradient in relation to Heidelberg Road, which drains south into Murray Creek. My complex contains 5 townhouses with 5 substantial retention tanks for stormwater discharge, as well as one which was included in the crossover as Council's request in 2012 when they were built. Site's never flooded. However, in 2024, October, November, it flooded twice. We've had 2 apartment complexes go up side by side, accommodating 41 dwellings and 15 dwellings, where there is no permeable site for stormwater to into the ground. My site has 60% coverage. 2 occasions it's flooded. Hence, I'm needing to understand why it's flooding, the issues surrounding drainage pits, and also the problems associated. The question is, does Council have a policy in relation to the management of litter and debris entering public stormwater pits and drainage systems, so I can better address any further issues?
Thank you, Vince. The Director of Assets and City Services will respond.
Yes, Council does not have a specific policy in place for management of litter and debris in stormwater. However, it does have established practices in place for its asset. Council's drainage network consists of approximately 825 kilometres of pipes and 36,000 pits. The maintenance of Council's drainage system is undertaken through a combination of activities such as street sweeping, inspection and cleaning of pits and pipes. Council is currently trialling a place-focused approach to street sweeping on council roads, whereby areas with heavy leaf bark litter are swept more frequently than those with less leaf and bark litter. This targeted approach will help with the management of litter and debris entering public stormwater pits and drainage systems.
We'll receive a written response, Mayor, is that correct?
No responses.
That's what it is.
There are other ways to contact the council. Yeah, thank you. Our next question is from David Mulholland of Ivanhoe to ask a question.
Thank you, Don. Just as a brief introduction, Mayor, my question relating to Watermark, article appeared in the Herald Sun on the 29th of January. That article cited that Watermark's recorded bacteria levels were 60% above the maximum satisfactory threshold set by the Victorian Public Health Wellbeing Act. The question I had for Council was, first of all, can Council clarify the Herald Sun report and its findings? Additionally, what testing procedures do Watermark contracts follow, and how does Council communicate to the public?
Thank you for the questions, and the Director of Community Wellbeing, Joseph Tobacco, will respond.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question, Mr Mulholland. There's several parts to your question, so I'll answer those individually. So the safety and quality of our public pool water is of our priority, and to ensure compliance with health regulations, our pool water testing is conducted for opening each day to confirm safety conditions, every 3.5 hours by Watermark staff, monthly independent laboratory testing for microbiological quality, quarterly testing by Council. So if any of the test results indicate levels outside of regulatory standards, immediate action is taken to ensure. This may include temporary pool closures and, for instance, if chlorine levels are too high or too low. Should an independent laboratory test return an unsatisfactory, Council will immediately address, including conducting research. The recent laboratory test conducted on the 15th of January found no abnormalities. Over the past 5 years, all quarterly pool samples have been recorded as. Now, in the unlikely event of a public health risk, Council work with Watermark and the health authorities to inform the public. We do this in a number of ways. One, we erect clear signage at the facility. There are website notices and alerts, email notifications to members and to swim school participants, and we also use social. Now, regarding the Herald Sun article published on the 29th of January, it is unclear when or how the reported unauthorised testing was conducted, and variations in testings can sometimes occur, and it is standard practice to conduct re-testing if any result range. The Council remains committed to maintaining the highest standards of pool water quality and public safety and has confidence in the water market operator and our systems and processes.
Thank you. The next question is from Joseph Anderson of Eaglemont. Is Joseph in the room? If not, a response will be provided in writing. The next question is from Roger Fife of Ivanhoe. Roger. Thank you, Roger. Please ask your question.
Thank you. A bit stiff from having to sit there for so long, so forgive me for that. Look, the context is I'm asking about what appears to be citizen activism in a section of Waterdale Road between Lower Heidelberg Road and Ivanhoe and a dip in the road before it then rises to go to the railway underpass. So a number of the councillors would be familiar with it. Essentially, it appears that some, I presume residents, because it's a fair walk to the shopping centre, have decided that they don't like that section of Waterdale Road being used as a rat run. It's a two-way, fairly heavily trafficked section of the road, and late last year I did attempt a question to ask whether there were any traffic counts being conducted, and I wasn't satisfied with the answer, so I've tried to be more specific.
So please now hone in on your question.
Yes. How will Council respond to reported parking on the south side of Waterdale Road, Ivanhoe, near Lower Heidelberg Road, which is a vacant block, that is close to Lower Heidelberg Road, as it causes significant impediment to two-way traffic movement?
Thank you for the question, Roger. A response will be provided by Director Swan.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. An extended no stopping area of 20 metres is present on Waterdale Road north of Lower Heidelberg Road to require vehicles not to park too close to the intersection. If vehicles park in this area, our parking enforcement team can issue a parking infringement. Another no stopping area exists on both sides of the road near Clarence Street. This section of Waterdale Road between these no stopping areas has been assessed as suitable for parking, with adequate road space to allow vehicles to travel in both directions, one vehicle at a time. Our aim for a local road is to balance the need for parking and traffic, and we don't aim to always allow for two-way traffic like you would see on the road.
Thank you. Our next question is from Melissa Murphy-Webster. I think it's our final question. Thank you, Melissa. Please ask your question.
Thank you. I would just like to know what mechanism would have to be put in place to start collecting the speakers' scripts, specific to what the speakers read out in chambers so that they can be added to final past minutes for each ordinary meeting and a searchable database. The current search features on the website could do with the ability to search within documents. I would expect that any script that was added would meet the 2-minute threshold and could allow for reference pertinent to what the speaker was talking about. The current method of trolling through video is not effective for proper revisiting of community concerns and assisting with community consultation.
Thank you, Melissa, for the question. And the response is from Linda Chappell, our Manager of Governance and Integrity.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Council meeting minutes are a record of council decisions and deliberations that enable officers to implement those. It is not common practice to record and transcribe verbatim comments made by a request to speak on agenda items. However, the speaker's intent in relation to being for or against an agenda item is recorded in the minute.
Councillor comments are also not captured in council meeting minutes in relation to items discussed debated on the agenda. The mechanism required to change this practice would be via a review of the current governance rules, specifically regarding community participation in council meetings. Should a review be undertaken, this would trigger a community consultation process on the governance rules in line with requirements under Section 60 of the Local Government Act 2020, requiring a project to be resourced and undertaken to complete that review. The governance rules were recently reviewed in two parts, comprising Part 1, Governance Rules and Election Period Policy, adopted 14th of November 2022, and Part 2 as a targeted review of community and public participation, now known as Chapter 3, Community Participation, adopted 30th of October 2023. As part of recommendations and via recent reforms from the 2023 IBAC report, Operation Sandon, Local Government Victoria have commenced work to address recommendations that develop and introduce model governance rules to promote best practice meeting procedure across the sector. These are expected to be published and come into force by December 2025. As it is not yet known if those model governance rules will determine how the community participates in meetings moving forward, and given the expected release in December 2025, it would not be considered a valuable use of resources to undertake a review at the time. A review of the current live stream recording process for council meetings to identify any potential improvements on current process planned for later.
Thank you for all those questions and for the residents here that have waited to ask those questions. It's, yeah, you know, we always think we're going to have a short meeting and then it doesn't end up that way. So thank you for your patience. Yeah, we like having you here. There is no confidential meeting tonight, so I now close the meeting at 10:02 p.m. and thank you again for your attendance. The next ordinary meeting will be held on Monday, the 3rd of March.